Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're back for part two of our discussion of the offense in that Chargers game. A happy discussion it was. Joe LaCroix joining me again for this second conversation. Joe, really appreciated our first.
Oh, man, this was great, man. Thank you so much for including me. This has been a great conversation, and I'm also learning some stuff at the same time.
I just love having you on, and the notion that you're learning stuff. You brought a lot to this, including some weather stats for Lamar Jackson. We talked about that. It might be a little surprising. Joe brought up in terms of him having a 109 passer rating in games below 40 degrees, which I would have never guessed. I think of Lamar Jackson as having a lot of trouble with wind. It takes away some of the advantage you have there. But we had a lot of other things we discussed. If you haven't heard it, the Charlie Kolar news we discussed in the first thing, how the Ravens may react to that. We talked a little bit about the John and Jim coaching rivalry and how Jim not only looks like a codger as an old man, he looks a lot older than he is, and he's younger than John actually, but then he actually was badly outcoached by his older brother there. We talked a little bit about what's happening in terms of the efficiency of the Ravens offense. And of course, we talked about Lamar Jackson's great game extension of his dominance on Monday Night Football. So lots to go back. Please go back and take a listen to that episode if you would. So we'll jump into this on the second show and start where we always do, which is a detailed look at the offensive line play. And Joe, I'll let you just start it off in terms of maybe any observations you had at a high level, and then take us through it.
Yeah. So personally, I thought overall they played well, but I guess I'd say it was uneven depending on who was the person, the player in question, I suppose. But I mean, Lamar, they credited him with the Chargers with 1 sack. You and I both mentioned that wasn't a sack. I think if you go from 2nd and 10 and then it was 3rd and 10 again, okay, you lost like 6 inches. I don't really think that really counts. But I mean, if you want to work left to right here. All right, so let's go. All right, let's start with Ronnie Stanley. What would you grade his performance?
So let's talk a little bit about the underlying stuff here. So he had I thought, a very good game, and I saw PFF did not grade him well as a run blocker in this game, by the way. But I'll just talk my way through how I saw it. 3 missed blocks on the game, half a pressure, a third of a sack. That a third of a sack, by the way, shouldn't have been charged against him because it was really a run play, and as a run for 0, he would have otherwise probably had a 0 score on that play. And it would have given him a couple more points in my system. But he had 50 points, 0.86 per play, fairly significant adjustment from facing a lot of Khalil Mack on that side. And he also had 8 blocks in level 2. One thing you'll notice about the grades in this game is tremendous number of level 2 blocks in this game, just a prodigious number across the entire line. And when you're having a great running game, that can happen. I can't remember ever seeing a game where a team had 33 blocks in level 2 split among their linemen. It's probably happened before. I just can't remember the last time it did. So Ronnie, an A overall. As I saw, I did have 2 highlight blocks. One of them was a nice backside 2 man block, and another one is a combination that's a good one. But Ronnie really showing that mobility again, getting into level 2 and making blocks that he hasn't in several years now.
So in terms, just so I understand, level 2 blocks, how far down the field is that?
It's anyone really past the line of scrimmage that you block.
Okay.
So if you move, it's typically the most common one is what offensive linemen do when they make a combination block is they'll start with a double team on one player, and the goal is to get that one player, the defensive tackle usually, set up so that the guard has him, or the guard or the center, and then the other player moves forward into level 2 and tries to pick up whoever he can. The process is known as looking for work, and he'll go in and find somebody in level 2. It's blocking 101, and they have their own individual codes for releasing that guy into level 2. And that the level 2 blocks are typically what turn 3-yard runs into 8-yard runs. And then sometimes you get blocks way down the field that they're the ones that turn 10-yard runs into 30-yard runs. But it's something the Ravens have been very good at. They're very well coached in the past from Joe D'Alessandris in terms of that. And I think Warhop, that part he's done very well with. I think on the pulling, it's been less successful.
One more question about Ronnie before we move on. Is this a continuation of his kind of resurgent season that people have said that he's having?
I would say yes. And I would not My feeling is his resurgence hasn't been quite at the level other people have done it. Part of that is he gives up a lot of pressures where the throwing cone is impeded, but Lamar Jackson's extremely comfortable with that, and they're very facile. Lamar Jackson's main thing is don't let the edge player get his hands on me and throw me to the ground. And
Gotcha.
Ronnie is got this terrific mirror, always stays between the edge player and Jackson, or for the most part does. And if he gives up an occasional bump pressure because he's giving up ground to maintain that mirror, Jackson's very comfortable dealing with that as a trade-off. And, as we've seen, Lamar Jackson's been outstanding under pressure or even moving around the pocket and extending plays.
All right, let's move along to Patrick Mekari. What did you grade his play on Monday night?
So a mixed game again for Mekari. A lot of problems with penalties this year. He had another offensive holding. You mentioned in the first show that it was a 6. I didn't look it up. I thought it might even be more than that, but it's been bad. We'll leave it at that.
I got that from Pro Football Reference just for that's what they have 6 for him.
Okay, and then he may have had one declined as well.
Okay.
And if that happens, that's every bit as bad, by the way, because you gave an option to the defense to decline that penalty, and they said, "Oh no, we'll take this, 4-yard loss instead." That ended the drive, and then they're happy. But the funny thing about Mekari this year, he got another C in this game, and he's been playing well despite an absurdly high penalty count. And going into this game, I want to say it was like over 40% of his deductions. I put a tweet out about it. Might have been 44% of his total deductions since he's been at guard have been on penalties. And I know you probably don't know this, Joe, but I'm extremely harsh on penalties relative to PFF. I think that they're one-man operations where PFF believes that PFF scoring method anyway would indicate to you just make 2 decent run blocks and you get out of the negative from a holding call. And it's like,
interesting.
It's not the way I see it at all.
I'm actually with you, so that's fine with me.
All right. So he gave up a third of a sack again. That's kind of BS. He gave up 5 missed blocks. Otherwise, had a very good game again. So a C overall, and he's kind of towards the bottom of that C range at guard. He's actually in the middle of the C range at guard at a .79. Did have 4 level 2 blocks. His holding call came on a pull, so he got -1 of 6 possible points on pulls, which is not good, and that has been a problem for the Ravens. But Mekari had been the one guy who'd kind of been holding his end up in terms of pulls. And this game, it was surprising that Faalele actually stepped up with some decent pulls.
Yeah, overall, Mekari is one that it's a mixed bag no matter what you get. I'm proud of the way that he's stepped up this year. This was going to be a big season for him too, because I think there was a lot on his plate.
Right.
Yeah, especially that. But I'm just saying from what he's doing on the field is too. I mean, this was kind of I think he's playing for his future with this team. So I'm happy to see him succeed. But those penalties, man, they're backbreakers sometimes.
Let me ask this question to you. What's the highest you would go in terms of paying Mekari next year? So he's going to require a multi-year deal, and the Ravens have so much on their plate in terms of internal signings that they have to deal with. It's going to be very hard. They're not going to be able to sign everybody, but they've got to make a decision on Ronnie Stanley, Isaiah Likely early, Linderbaum early, Travis Jones early, maybe Ardarius Washington early, maybe even, because it's the kind of guy you get a bargain on, Daniel Faalele early.
Yeah. I mean, if from all the people you've listed, though, I would put Mekari towards the bottom of that list of people that I'd want to re-sign, though. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes the machinations of paying guys what they deserve or what they're going to get, I personally kind of struggle with that. But if you put it down to, if you listed all 6 players you just had there and who you would want to sign in terms of greatest to least, I'd put Mekari towards the bottom, because I do think that you could bring in a cheaper free agent than what you might have to re-sign him for to get the same level of play.
Right. The same level of play, probably. The versatility has been very valuable to the Ravens in the past, because they've used him at tackle. In fact, part of my thinking is even he shouldn't be in there at guard, not because he's not the best guard the Ravens have right now, because he might be, but because he's probably the best tackle backup they have.
Yeah.
And very fortunately, we haven't really had to see the tackle backups. Not since Mekari, in that rotation was going on early in the year, have we had any question of other tackles getting on the field. So we don't really know who Josh Jones is. He's had, I think, somewhere between 9 and 15 snaps for the year. It's really limited, but I don't I think McCary would still be first up off the bench at tackle.
And with how many questions we had about this offensive line after the first 4 weeks or so, like, and even going into the season, it was a huge question mark because there was a lot of turnover. DeCosta even said they wanted to get younger. They needed to try to overhaul the entire thing. I think that his play has gotten better throughout the year, and I think the line as a whole is gelling, and he's a huge part of that. But again, I don't know what his future holds with this team. Hopefully by playoff time, I'm talking about that he's the kind of guy that you can't miss on. We got to hold on to him. But moving along, I'm sorry.
I think you might end up paying a lot for him is what I was going to say. I mean, he might be like 3 years, $27 million or something. And I just don't know if the Ravens can afford another contract to an offensive lineman like that. They may have to, or if they do, maybe they have to not sign Ronnie Stanley would be the other possibility. I'm not sure they're ready to do that either.
That would be tough. But let's get to the center position. Tyler Linderbaum, kind of an up and down game for him, but how did you score it?
Yeah, he's had a good overall year, so there has been a question there, but he's had a little bit of problem with some bigger men, and this was a game where he had a few additional problems. Honestly, most of his problems were in the run game this game, which is unusual. Linderbaum usually a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. Sometimes his size and length gets him into trouble as a pass blocker. 58 plays, 50 blocks. He missed 6 in this game, which is a lot. Most of those came on run plays. He had 2 half penetrations allowed. That means when he's half of the responsibility for a loss on a run play is what that means, is a slight additional amount of scoring for that. And he had an offensive holding. I know a lot of people said they thought it was kind of ticky-tack. It looked like he had the guy hooked, took him to the ground behind the play. It was kind of unnecessary, I thought, but I think Linderbaum also was going down himself. He was being pancaked on the play in the middle, and it was one where he probably couldn't see exactly how the play was developing behind him. And so that ended up being a loss of 5 additional points for that holding flag. Now, on the plus side, he had 9 level 2 blocks to lead the team. He's out there in space, finding people, and nobody is better at looking for work downfield than Linderbaum. Had 2 pancakes in the game and 2 highlight blocks, which was nice. Normally I like to get 1 highlight block from each player. If they have them, I'm not going to score them in a kind of way to bias it. But when a player has 2 highlight blocks, that's a good game, and they'll get a plus 0.01 in their subjective adjustment from that. And Linderbaum got a decent subjective adjustment from this game, which brought him up to a C- for the game. But kind of shows you how it's difficult to score well if you have a holding flag in a game, particularly at center where the grading curve is more strict.
And that was a key. That would have been a key play. That was their final drive that he had that holding play. It would have been a 3rd and 1. Instead, you have a 2nd and 14. The next play was a Lamar run for, I think, no gain. And then after that, it was a gain of 1, and you had to punt with about 3 minutes left. I am kind of nervous every single time we get towards the end of these games and you're up by 2 touchdowns and you have to give the ball back, especially to a quarterback like Justin Herbert. And I mean, I was waiting for the bottom to drop out, I have to admit. But
okay, so question for you. They got to the point where they're 2nd and 19. So the holding penalty is done. It's in the books. You can't do anything about it. So they have 2 plays they have to run, and they had a chance to maybe get a first down if they try and push the ball. But if you do, you risk leaving more time on the clock for the Chargers to do so. Did you agree with the decision to just effectively run the ball twice and give up the football at that point?
I kept saying to myself, do I want them to throw here? And I wrestled with it. I'm glad that they didn't, just because I trust more that there's not going to be something wild happening, like a deflection and the ball pops up and it's intercepted. I mean, I think I don't have it offhand. I can't remember what the clock was at when they did end up punting.
About 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I was all right with it, but it was kind of like you're capitulating after the penalty. You're kind of like, all right, just let them burn the rest of their timeouts. Let's just punt the ball. And then obviously you've done your defensive episodes. I don't even want to talk about the last 3 minutes or last 2.5 minutes on defense there. But I was okay with them running it. If they would have thrown, I would have understood throwing it because the clock would have been stopped anyway. But again, it is what it is at this point.
Okay. All right. Very good. I guess I'm just move on to Daniel Fa'alele. There's C-, by the way, for Linderbaum for the game. Daniel Fa'alele missed 7 blocks, allowed 3 pressures. He'd been doing a really good job of pass blocking up until now. I thought he was in the cone on 3 separate occasions in this game. So three pressures scored. Didn't have any other negative events, that's generally pretty good for him. Been kind of joking week after week. There's kind of a whack-a-mole situation going on with what Daniel Fa'alele doesn't do well or what he improves, and then something else goes wrong.
Yeah.
And it's usually, in this game, not a terrible pass blocking game, but he misses 7 blocks. And then I look at the other plus sides. He had 6 blocks in level 2, which is very un-Fa'alele like. He's bad at his foot speed looking for work, but he's also bad in decisiveness looking for work in level 2.
And that's kind of even worse than
yes.
kind of just standing around looking for something to do. That's, if I was the offensive line coach, I'm like, no, son, go do something. But like you said, a mixed bag. You don't really know what you're going to get with him. I will say, and I think he had 2 highlight plays here. Was one of them that pull that he had to spring Henry for, I think it was like a 17-yard run in the second quarter?
Okay, now let me see if I actually did score that one, a highlight. I think I did, and it's one that Maureen asked me, do you want to get a highlight on that play? There was a run left actually for -3 where he got a highlight, and that was just on a combination block.
Okay.
So it didn't really it wasn't his block that went wrong. But then, yes, he pulled a 27-yard run by Henry.
Yeah,
that's
what it was.
exactly
Yeah.
correct. And he drove
Yeah.
0, which we've identified as Henley from the first show, 10 plus yards in level 2. Great block.
And even then, I mean, it got to the point where I saw John Gruden talking about it on his podcast. They were talking about it on Get Up. I was like, all right, he's probably one of the players that I get a lot of calls about. Like, what is this guy even doing? Like, Fa'alele cannot be on the field anymore. I feel like he's trending upwards. That play showed me that there is something that he can, if he works on it, he can be that guy that's like, because that was the one thing people always said, he can't move his feet well enough to pull. It looked fine to me there.
5 out of 7 on pulls in this game. So he actually was significantly better this game than McCary was. Now 5 out of 7's pretty good. It's not great or anything. You wouldn't want to do that for an entire game, but but for him to connect on 5, he has a lot of trouble. He's so big bodied. He has a lot of trouble negotiating the space from his right guard position across several linemen who are moving their feet. That is a thing that the Ravens have taken a big step back on without Delisandris. Warhop does not seem to teach the footwork that goes with pulling or reemphasize it on a daily basis. Used to love to watch Joe coach every summer. Whenever the offensive line were close enough to where the media roped off area was, I would always go right up to him and try and catch whatever I could from him coaching, because he'd do this very individualized thing. He's a really old school build up from individual blocks to half line plays, and he really wants to be watching everything that goes on, which means people get less reps, but you're forced to watch other people's reps also. And when he sees something going wrong, he just steps right in there. He goes, no, here you put your right foot, here you put your left foot, then you go for it. He's extremely footwork oriented. And I miss that. I think that the Ravens probably, since I've seen scoring some 2005 games that they had big footwork problems, and now I see this happening, I'm like, there's something about Joe D missing that probably is central to why the Ravens, it's not going well. And then, of course, Fa'alele is just a huge human being, so he's a lot of trouble moving through small spaces.
Yeah, and that's when Joe D passed. I mean, I obviously there's the interpersonal relationships, and that had to be really difficult. But I do think the offensive line has really suffered without his leadership there. It's been getting better, but again, I mean, he had so much impact on that team just beyond the coaching thing. Losing him, I think it just hurt on so many different levels for the team.
I want to bring up one more story about Joe D that goes with Fa'alele.
Yeah.
He took Fa'alele to the woodshed in front of everybody. One time this summer, one day this summer. And I mean, it was bad. Fa'alele was down on one knee, and he's it was a very hot day. He was having a lot of trouble with the heat, pretty clearly. And I think Joe Dita might have been on him about effort, footwork. not remembering what he's supposed to do. It could have been a lot of things because you can't hear the conversation, but you see him just screaming at him for a long period of time. What I take that to mean is that Faalele was his guy, and he's that much more upset about the fact that Daniel is not picking up on the things that he wanted to teach him. And this was kind of in that point where I think he may have known some things about his health that were not in great shape, and he really wanted Faalele to be a player who would succeed. And then all of a sudden, just the news came from nowhere. He had rushed to the hospital, and Danny Warhop had been Warhop had been hired, and it's just incredibly sad that almost in no time after that he's gone. And Faalele, I'm sure he realizes how much Joe D loved him in terms of what's going on here, and it's nice to see him have some success this year. And it's been modest. He's a year 3 player. It's not fair to have a developmental curve for him, but he's a guy who I'm still hopeful that there's a little bit more upside from where he is. It's going to be hard because contractually there's just not a lot of room for the Ravens to hold on to a player who might need a mid-range contract. And when I say mid-range, $3.5-4 million a year for 3 years kind of thing might be an extension for Faalele. But anyway, the relationship between him and Joe D was very apparent.
Well, speaking of a player that seems to be having a lot of upside, this has been someone that I've been watching a lot recently. How did you grade Roger Rosengarten last game?
So Rosengarten has been getting more help than probably almost any other lineman in the NFL, which is not unexpected because of who he is and because he's who he's been facing. And again, faces Joey Bosa for most of the game on that right side. The Ravens used 0.91 or 0.92. 0.91. Set and chip blockers per play, which that's a high number. So when I look at that number, Joe, I'm thinking they have 5 eligible receivers, and they're using 0.91 of those 5 in some sort of blocking responsibility, whether it's set, meaning they're staying into block, or chip, meaning they're usually going to the rib cage of that player before they go out for a pass. That's a big commitment because even with a chip block, you've got a very limited set of routes you can run after that. It's usually just some sort of a outlet route. You're trying to make yourself available to Lamar. But he has benefited from that, and he had a really good game as a pass blocker. I thought in this game with 1.5 pressures allowed, he did miss 7 blocks. I'd say he wasn't as good as a run blocker. Now the good thing about my system is he didn't have any penalties, and pass blocking is way more important than run blocking. So 88 overall, an A after adjustment. He had a very big adjustment in this game. Bosa has not been that great, so this would not have meant it for alone, but he had 6 highlight blocks in this game, which is about the most I've seen the entire year. Also 6 blocks in level 2. So he had some trouble with run blocking, and a lot of people would say, well, he missed some key run blocks in this game. They wouldn't be wrong. But he also made some good plays, finding work in level 2 in this game, and had some combination blocks that were positive. So good game for Roger. Still a lot of room for growth there. I don't think the Ravens are certain yet whether he's the 2025 answer at left tackle, which is something I wonder just kind of what calls you getting around the station about that.
A lot better calls about Ronnie Stanley staying there than moving Roger Rosengarten over there.
Right.
And back-to-back weeks, you have to deal with TJ Watt and then Nick Bosa. Or Joey Bosa, excuse me. So, which Bosa brother are we? I always get confused which one is which.
Joey is with the Chargers. Nick is with the 49ers.
I always get them mixed up. But overall, I think people are high on him just because, at least I'm talking about Roger, that there is a general feeling of people wanting him to succeed. I don't think the level of frustration has been there from callers yet on Rosengarten. But again, as we were talking with Makari in terms of holding on to different people, Stanley's stock has gone way up in terms of the people that are saying like, oh man, Ronnie Stanley looked like Ronnie Stanley from 2019 last game, things like that. Personally, I'd rather have Ronnie stay there, but I also understand that like he kind of came back didn't want to go out on a low note. So I don't know if that means he's saying I'll have one more year and then I go somewhere else, or I'm trying to earn another contract with the team that drafted me. So
he shouldn't know who he's signing with yet. It would be tampering if he did, but
Oh yes, yeah.
He'll be a free agent, and honestly, there'll be some other teams I think who the Ravens can't compete for his services with all the
Yes.
other people they have. If you're Ronnie Stanley, let's say your contract might be $54 million with the Ravens or $57 million with somebody else over 3 years. Okay. Would you take that sort of a hometown discount? And I don't, projecting what other players are going to do or projecting how other people should react to the money is just completely unfair. But expecting Ronnie to not put the money first is also not fair. But would you encourage Ronnie, or would you as Ronnie take a little bit less money, like that order of magnitude, 1/19 less, 5% less, whatever it might be, to stay in Baltimore and have the good chance to make the Ravens Ring of Honor, and then be going forward, be always part of Ravens celebrations that would occur after the fact. He'll be part to some degree, even if he moves on, but always part. If he stays here 3 more years, he's clearly going to be in the ring.
And at the same time, you get to play with Lamar Jackson. So
yeah.
I mean, Lamar can make your job a lot easier compared to some other quarterbacks that you might be blocking for.
Great point.
So personally, I've always really liked Ronnie. He was much maligned over the last few years because of the injury and then trying to come back and coming back too soon. I mean, we get a lot of people call and say that he's soft, things like that. I mean, I don't like to say that thing about, I don't like to say those types of things about players when I don't know how bad the pain is. He fractured his ankle. I don't know what that feels like. And I can't imagine what it's like to be 6'8" and have to block some of the best players in the world at the game. So I hope he stays. If I'm Ronnie Stanley, I'll take a little bit less money to stay with the team that drafted me, all the perks that you said. And then, I mean, in terms of left tackles, you might be the second best one in team history.
Yes. Behind Ogden. Yes.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it's really him and then Gaither. I mean, there's not a lot to choose from. Michael Orr wasn't very good. So
yeah.
I'll say one more thing about Ronnie Stanley, and this gets to the work ethic. Ronnie, there's videos all over the place of Derrick Henry doing all this stuff during the offseason to maintain himself. And, a part of that is him marketing himself to other NFL teams. He's doing a really good job, knowing what's really important. But that video needs to be out there. And most players, it's the same stuff. Is they want to have highlight videos of them making catches and whatnot. They want to put them up. Ronnie Stanley's post-practice routine is remarkable for trying to keep his body in shape. And nobody really knows about it except for the media. And the reason we know about it is because if Ronnie Stanley is on the list of players who are coming to the podium, you're going to have to wait an extra half hour. And the thing is, he goes through this routine that's roughly 45 minutes after practice.
Yeah.
He ices his body, comes out, whatever.
Spark something uncommon this holiday season with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. If you haven't finished your holiday shopping yet, don't panic. We've got a secret source for incredible original gifts, and that's Uncommon Goods. They've got unique, hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that it's exactly what I wanted feeling. Somehow, they know the exact perfect gift for every single person you know. Whether it's a football fan or a book lover, they've got unique gifts. Myself, I got some drinking glasses that have the blueprint of Camden Yards on it, as well as some nice ceramic ice cream bowls that are the shape of the Baltimore Orioles helmet, just like the plastic ones you get from the stadium, but I keep them in my cabinet, specifically for ice cream after those Oriole wins. So when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're also supporting small artists and independent businesses. Many of their things are handcrafted, made in small batches. So go ahead and shop now before they sell out this holiday season. To get your 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/ravens. That's uncommongoods.com/ravens for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, because we're all out of the ordinary.
Stretching or other things he does. I don't know his whole routine, but he comes across, he's got a towel around his neck. So, he's done a lot of things, between practice when he had his uniform on, at this point when he's finally at the podium. And one time it was just down to 4 of us who were left. The entire rest of the media
Oh my
from
gosh,
camp
I didn't know
had
that.
gone away, and the
Yeah.
4 of us, including 2 Ravens employees,
Yeah.
are
Yeah,
there.
so they have to be there.
So, but he's an incredible amount of effort has gone into keeping himself healthy enough to play this year, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And he's had a very fine year. I think he's close to the player he was in 2019 and 20, which is good enough for me. Not quite an all-pro level, probably, but looking like a fine player. Might even go to a Pro Bowl this year.
I 100% agree. I have really had no problems with Ronnie. Like, in terms of other people saying, I got a lot of people calling back saying, all right, yeah, he's not what we thought he was. He's not as bad. He's not soft, blah, blah, blah. But I've always liked him. And I remember just that 2019 season, he was such a huge part of how good that run game was. So.
All right. Well, let's move on. Now we do an individual part of the show here, Joe. Your first time on,
Okay.
but pick any player you'd like to talk about. Kind of give me your thoughts of. It's usually skill position players because we just did the offensive line. We talked about Lamar extensively. There's other players we've talked about earlier. If you have an adjunctive point that you want to make, if that's a word,
Okay.
then do that, and I'll respond, and then I'll bring up a second player.
You had mentioned this in the first hour. Where is Keaton Mitchell in terms of running back snaps? I have been waiting for that. I have to admit, when he was on IR and he was coming back, I was super excited for the idea of kind of like a thunder lightning kind of thing with Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell. And I mean, I think maybe he's had 1 carry since he's come back, and the rest have been kick returns.
Yeah, it was 1 carry. It was negated by penalty, so
Yes.
He's got 0 carries officially.
Yeah.
He's only got 4 offensive snaps since he's been
do you
back.
have any idea why that may be? Is it scheme related, or?
I've got a couple theories. I don't know that any of these are done. It is scheme related in the sense that it's hard to get a player like Mitchell on the field, and he's competing for snaps with other players who are third wide receivers like Deontay Johnson, who are potential gadget players, which would also include Johnson, could include like a Wallace, for example, as well. Wallace has played extraordinarily well. Aguilar has been, provided some big plays for the Ravens. Deontay Johnson has done nothing. We'll talk about him, I'm sure. And I'd really like to see Keaton Mitchell get a chance as the gadget player. So put him on the field in some pony, some 2-back plays, and get him in motion as part of the misdirection. When Hill had the 51-yard run, this fantastic play for Justin. And I'm not trying to take this away from him because it was a great run, and he showed that he had the last little bit of burst to get away from to run away from the other defenders and get in the end zone. I really wanted to see Keaton Mitchell have that same lane to run on and see if he could outrun. He might have been taken down at the 25-yard line, and then we'd all know that this is not his year. This is, we're probably gonna have to wait till next year. And my guess is there might be some component to that. That doesn't mean you can't get him on the field and use him for misdirection, but you're less likely to want to give him the football. And that's really unfortunate after the back he was last year. Just one of the greatest years in NFL history for the carries he had.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just the burst isn't really there yet. We saw the same thing with J.K. Dobbins when he first came back. So, I mean, I don't want the guy to – I'm not trying to, hang him out to dry and just see, can he outrun that guy? But, I mean, but at the same time, Justice has done so much, and I was very happy to see him get that play. And I have to admit, I didn't know Justice Hill could run that fast.
I was a 4.43 guy coming out of college. So
that was impressive, man. That was impressive.
All right. So let me pick another one. I want to talk about Bateman a little bit. I know we hit on him in the first show a little bit, but really impressive. The focus, holding his hands low on the 2 end zone balls, and one of them worked out, one of them didn't. He drew a DPI on Fulton on one. He also drew another DPI on Fulton. Anytime you could do that, that's a good thing. But Fulton is the Chargers version of Stevens, a right cornerback who doesn't really look for the ball. He's a guy, an ex-receiver who's worth his salt, should be able to take advantage of, and Bateman really did in this game. I thought, I would not call it a drop, and that was kind of closer to the goal post on the left sideline. It's a contested catch. He didn't come down with the football, but really happy to see the trust between him and Lamar grow to the level it seems to be at.
Yeah, I mean, I still think if Flowers is going to be your number one receiver, Bateman's proven that he can be number two and even be your number one if Flowers is getting blanketed. So I'm very happy with. I don't even know if you'd call it a resurgence. Some people were worried that he was a failure to launch with this team. I got a lot of calls that are saying, "Why did we just give Rashad Bateman money? I don't get that contract."
You don't
I mean,
now?
yeah, but even at the time, I was like, "That's so cheap." Like, I don't. You're hardly spending anything to keep this guy that has a really, really high ceiling, and it seems like he's starting to get towards that ceiling and maybe even pushing it higher.
Would it be fair to say that Flowers and Bateman, even if Deontay Johnson really, like, let's say he hadn't really gotten started yet, or the Ravens acquired him this week,
Yeah,
let's say instead, there's basically there should be no reason to replace either of those guys with Deontay Johnson snaps?
no, not at all. Aguilar was the one person that everybody said, like, so I guess Aguilar's on the outs if they're getting a trade for Deontay Johnson, but it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Right. They both Aguilar and Wallace, for that matter, have both played more than Johnson since he got here. So, and Wallace is having he's having a fantastic year. You got to reward that to a degree. And it's kind of sad that Deontay Johnson has not been the guy they expected him to be. He's an insurance policy, and I'll even say this now: I'm not sure he's even the insurance policy they look to cash in if something were to happen at this point. So Bateman goes down as Aguilar just moved out to the X.
That's a good point. Well, and to mention Deontay Johnson, I think I had 3 or 4 calls the other day. I was just like, can this dude stay on his feet? Does he just come in to trip? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Don't know what to tell you, but I hope that he can find a spot on this team. That was another one that was like, all right, well, if he's up for grabs and they're willing to give him up for something for so cheap, just put him in there. I don't have no problem with that.
All right, how about another player?
So we talked about Bateman, Andrews. Let's go to Andrews. I've been pleasantly surprised with his level of play. Like, he's got a touchdown, I think, in 4 straight games after a lot of people were like, is Mark Andrews still even a part of this offense anymore? The catch, the touchdown catch, I don't know why they even said that was an incomplete pass at first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to wrapping my head around that. But I've noticed more that he seems to kind of be playing a safety valve kind of role for Lamar. He had a really nice play. It was a dump off that he slipped one defender and was able to get a first down out of that, where I thought it was like, well, that's going to be a 4th down play. I think it was on a 3rd down. Really, really impressive. I don't know if we're ever going to see the Mark Andrews that was in 2018 and 2019. I mean, he's still very young, but it doesn't seem like he's losing anything to Likely. I had a lot of people say, oh, like, we don't need Mark Andrews anymore. Let him walk and we'll just have Isaiah Likely be the new Mark Andrews. I don't think there is another. You don't just go get another Mark Andrews. I think the rapport that he has with Lamar and the connection there is something that is really special.
First of all, yes, absolutely. And it's been a credit to Lamar that he hasn't exclusively gone to Andrews as a receiver of last resort, as the bailout guy.
Yeah.
Because that had been hurting Andrews' statistics for years. If you look at the passer rating throwing to him, it had been a decline for a long time as he picked up more contested catches. And then in 2023, it kind of reversed itself. The tight ends as a group got very few total targets. But they were outstandingly high quality, over 140 passer rating throwing to the tight ends last year. So, sometimes I always say in gambling, there's only two feelings you ever have. You're pissed off because you lose, or you're pissed off because you didn't bet enough.
Yeah.
And this is a case is you're pissed off because you're not giving enough targets. That's the better one of the two, as opposed to pissed off because they're the marginal value of their targets is hurting their overall performance. And I felt the same way about Likely, catching 9 of 12 balls against the Chiefs, having the big game he had. I thought that was a harbinger that pretty much it was going to be Likely. Yeah. Now the Chiefs took Andrews away in that game very aggressively.
He was doubled a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, he has 37 receptions for 423 yards this year. The 6 touchdowns is great, and basically all of them have happened in the last
7
like
weeks.
7 weeks.
Yeah.
But even if you say his best years are behind him, quote unquote, I mean, I'll take this version of Mark Andrews all day long. I mean, you're 30 years tied 61st in receptions, 61st in yards, but you're 5th with 6 touchdowns for tight ends. That's perfect. I'll take it. I'm totally fine with that. If he's just going to be the end zone threat, throwing across the middle, going up to get the ball, then all right, that's fine with me.
He's very valuable to the Ravens in that way. Unfortunately, I look at this roster and all of the guys they need to try and sign early, all the guys they have to sign. Oweh is in a group where they also can sign him early because he's got a 5th-year option coming up. This is the chance for divisible benefit contracts for the Ravens coming up this offseason. They're not going to go out and get a bunch of new players. They've got the superstars in-house. They need to retain what they have. They need to keep the Beatles together here on offense, pretty much.
I agree.
The problem with Andrews is that he's one of the big options to create cap space on this team, and so they can pick up about $12 million in cap space by cutting him. And they do have other options at tight ends. They could draft another tight end, and it's kind of ruthless in the way the business works that you have to cycle out older players who are making more money. It's just it's the only way you can keep up being competitive with the cap constraint being there. And I'm afraid they're probably going to have to do that he'll be one of the sources to see if Ronnie Stanley can get paid, if they can pay any of the year 3 guys, Travis Jones maybe, or Linderbaum or whoever it might be.
What you said we were talking about Ronnie a little bit earlier in terms of taking a discount. If there is one player I think that would do that, Mark Andrews kind of does seem like that guy. Again, I don't want to take money out of the guy's pocket, but he seems to really love playing with Lamar. I think he really enjoys being with the franchise. I mean, he's not too far away from having the franchise record for touchdowns. He does have it now, doesn't he? He has the tight end record.
Past Todd Heap, yeah.
Yeah, he passed Todd Heap. So I mean, like you said with Ronnie, Ronnie could be Ring of Honor. Mark Andrews is already in there. I think he would really want to win a ring with this team, and if it means that he might have to be tight end 2 to Isaiah Likely and make a little bit less money, or I mean, just get a new deal to restructure and things like that, I think that he would be that guy.
Oh, it's interesting. They can extend him. They have 2 expensive guys currently that they want to extend and reduce their 2025 cap hit. And one is Andrews, but the other is Marlon Humphrey. And Marlon Humphrey's been their best defensive player, arguably. I think it'd be hard to say you don't try and extend him after the year he's had. So I keep looking at it, and there's nothing wrong with what Andrews has done, but it's 2/3 of a season, and he's got 44 targets, I think it is.
Okay.
It's not enough. There's not enough total production there for me to say he's the guy that I want to give all the money to. And it's a really sad thing to say, but because he's been so great for the Ravens. He'll always be a member of the family here. It's just I'm not sure that the Ravens got room. But you make a good point. Maybe there is a way that he could take less money and hang around. Take a reduction to $7 million next year or something instead of 12, and that encourages the Ravens to try and make another run at it and defer some of these signings.
100%. I mean, I'd hate to see him go, but this is the rough part, and especially with the cap space with this team right now is just really, really rough. Right. Going into next season, it's going to be really, really hard. I'm going to be getting a lot of calls about why did we cut this person? Why did we cut that person? But
one of the things I find is that the people who want to trade for everybody, any name wide receiver from 5 years ago, they want to trade for. Oh, boy. Des Bryant's available. We don't have him now.
Right.
It's like
Odell. Let's go get Odell
make
again.
It
happen. I've heard every single type of different receiver. The Devontae Adams thing was another one that just never made sense to me. Never made sense to me. But I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah. So anyway, the people who are into that, they have no consciousness about the cap. As a general rule, I'm not saying there aren't a couple of people who do understand the cap and want that player, but generally speaking, I find that to be the trade-off. And when you understand what the Ravens situation is with all these guys, they could sign early, They've got the superstars. I mean, this team is built right now to win, and they need to keep the guys that they have built to win in the future. But I really don't like it when people trade away my future as a season ticket holder by
that's a good point.
acquiring cap that I have to pay for next year. And the Odell Beckham, that was exactly what the deal was. We're paying for Odell Beckham right now.
I never thought of that. I never really thought of it that way. That's a really good point. I mean, to some people, it's just funny money, and we try my best to remind people that it doesn't really work. That this isn't Madden. You can't just try to make off the wall trades and hope they work out, or cut this person and sign that person. It's definitely something that I think a majority of the fans don't have a good grasp on.
Well, anyway, it's nice to talk about this. I want to briefly mention Tez Walker here. He got on the field for 2 snaps in this game offensively.
Okay. Yeah.
We're getting near to the point. He's one of the guys who's kind of on the bubble right now, where I think he might be sent to IR for the year. I hope the Ravens can defer that for as long as possible. Rasheen Ali should go before him. I think Christian Welch might also go before him if Roquan is back. But they at some point they're probably going to be forced to do a decision about Walker if they need another player. So I didn't hear yet, and we're at 5:13 right now as we're recording this. But the Ravens probably put a claim in for Marcus May. If you could find out for him whether they got him or not, I'd be very excited if they got him. You're going to hear my 2 octaves higher voice if they got him for.
I'm looking.
Okay, so I'm not sure if it'd been announced by the league by now or not anyway, but it'll be interesting to hear if he gets picked up by somebody. Have a couple of mailbag questions I want to get to here, and appreciate folks if you want to get your questions in, send them on Twitter to #FilmStudyMailbag. Please try and include that in the body of the text, even if you have to go into a second response to your own tweet to extend the question, because I have to sort by this to try and find these. All right. So we got a good one here from Lyman's Backpack is the first one. And he says, it's hard to complain with much about Lamar, but it feels like he's passing up easy first down scrambles for lower percentage passes. I thought maybe he could be dealing with an injury, but when he does run, he looks fast, like when he blocked for Zay Flowers. Thoughts? Want to take a shot at it first? We could kind of talk about this earlier.
Yeah, we did touch on that. I agree with the mailbag question in terms of he looks fast when he's running down. Once he gets it going, seems fine. Maybe it's stopping and starting is the issue. I don't know. I mean, I think the injury designations he's had this year have been neck, back, and knee. We know about his past knee injury. I feel like he's just hunting for big plays. And it's maybe that's just something that's a between the ears thing. You can't really do much about that. That's more of just, why I can get the 20-yard pass when I could just get a 10-yard run and a first down. It's like, no, take the 10-yard run or the 10-yard check down or something like that. But again, that's not this is a Ravens offense that I still think it's better than the 2019 offense. It's explosive. You can have they came back from 10 points down in one quarter. They have 4 comeback wins this year when they've been down by 10 points or more. This is a quick strike offense while also being able to run the ball down your throat and take time off the clock. I think that's gotten into Lamar's head where he's like, all right, well, I can hit Zay on the sideline there 35 yards downfield. I can, find Rashad Bateman on a deep pass. I totally understand Lamar, but I agree with the person on X. Take the easier plays sometimes.
All right. I really appreciate the question, Lyman. Lyman. I don't know if his name is actually Lyman. It's Lyman's Backpack. But it is a case, I think, where I'm just leaning into the evolution of Lamar Jackson here. And Lamar Jackson has gone through things where he's want to be a runner. He wants to be a passer. I kind of like the extend Lamar. I think we've seen some incredible, fabulous football plays from that this year that aside from just their importance in the games, the play against Cincinnati and, some of the other ways he's evaded by going back and to the right against defenses have just been magical. I'm just enjoying the ride right now, and I'm not willing to say he shouldn't be doing this or he shouldn't be doing this. I will say this: if he's hiding an injury because of what's going on, then I think that the Ravens are doing a marvelous job keeping it a secret, and that should be lauded at least.
100%. I mean, that's not even. I know Stephen A. Smith says that he talks to Lamar's camp, and Lamar didn't like that, but I don't even know. I don't even know what that means. So,
yeah. Let's see what else we have. By the way, some sad news here. Marcus May claimed by the Chargers, and I hate to bring this up right now, but if the Ravens had lost that game last night to the Chargers, then the Ravens might have gotten him because the Chargers would have been basically right in line in front of them in terms of
that's a good point.
Pick. So it's a bummer. Okay, but we don't want to lose the game. It's not worth. Marcus May is not worth losing the game, but the Ravens do still find themselves short at safety. Yeah, all right, I'm looking for another question, but I can't really find one now in the group here. Which probably I know there was one, and he sent it to me as a direct message. So give me just a second, and I will get there. Brandon Croxton, where are you? There you go. All right. And so he says, I had a long-winded question for the offensive mailbag and don't have enough characters. In the first 7 games this season, Lamar had averaged 10 carries for about 60. So we can get some similar things here for about 65 yards per game, 6.3 yards per carry. In the last 5, he's averaged just 6 carries for 28 yards per game. Also, Henry has averaged 124 yards and 6.5 yards per carry in the first 7 and 90 yards and 5.2 yards per carry since. There have been fewer designed runs and scrambles by Lamar, and it appears to have slightly reduced Henry's effectiveness. Also, my theory is that he has an injury sustained in the Cleveland game they are trying to protect. So that's the other side of that. Good call out there. But do you see something else that might be causing this? Tougher defenses, O-line troubles, etc. I think we've actually probably discussed this to the level that I have anything to contribute to the conversation. Brandon's an ex defensive lineman who played with Marcus Douglas in college.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, and he always talks about what a great player he was. And he's on the show from time to time.
Cool.
But really appreciate the question, Brandon. I don't know that I have anything more to add than we just did for the previous question. He's running a little bit less. Do I think it's really reducing Henry's effectiveness? I think it's more likely Henry's effectiveness is reduced by the outlier status of his effectiveness from earlier the year. So if he's running for 5.2 yards per carry now and he's running for 6.8 yards per carry earlier in the season, it's probably just kind of natural regression to a mean.
And also I think sometimes he suffers from Todd Monken not really wanting to give him the ball, but I think that's a whole nother conversation to have.
All right. So you're saying not being persistent enough with the running game in the second half of some games. Yeah.
All
right.
That's a game flow kind of thing, though. So I don't know. I don't really have that much of a complaint about that.
Right. It is a game flow thing, but an interesting thing. I think it's also been what the defense is giving you thing.
Yeah.
And Lamar's been so good at reading that at the line of scrimmage. Cincinnati had one game where they were packing the line of scrimmage and did a ton of simulated pressures, but they actually had to abandon that entirely. They went from 15 2-man simulated pressures to 0 in the second game because the tactic didn't work.
I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's showing that much simulated pressure. Those guys on the line of scrimmage is going to mean you're not running the ball on that play. You're trying to get the ball out quickly. And I think Lamar is actually part of that decision-making process. It's not just Monken telling him you got to.
Okay. That's a fair point.
All right, Joe, just an absolute pleasure doing this show with you. Tell folks again, how they maybe get to be on 105.7 or how they just want to talk football with you because you clearly have a lot to offer. How they do that?
You can find me on Twitter at Joe_LaCroix. Got to make sure that second underscore is in there. And then if you want to be on the show, on the Big Bad Morning Show, just give me a call at 410-583-1057. You can also text that number. I check the text line. The hosts don't check the text line, though. I will say that. So if you start sending mean things, it's not getting read.
So Rob Long's an idiot. If you say that,
yes, it's getting. Yeah, I'm kicking that out.
So tell us a little bit about the conversation between the booth and the on-air guys, because I know you have multiple ways. You can contact them directly. Tell them. I don't want to tell the story for you.
So the way that it works is, and this is actually true for basically all live media. For us, we have a talk back that we can. It's a button that I can press, and I can talk directly to each host in their ear, or I can press one button and I can talk to all three of them at the same time. Usually in TV, it's called an IFB. It's not like really the same thing for radio, but I use it a lot for, let's say, throw a random stat out or to check a fact, to things like that. It's just a way that I can tell them something and try to make it is my job to make sure they sound like they know what they're talking about 100% of the time. And I'd say 95% of the time they do, but sometimes it's just like, like, I don't know how many snaps Malik Harrison played the other night. And then I can be like 73 or something like that. And that's one way to do it. I can also, I text them a lot. And then we also have another computer program that I can type that into that. And it's just a chat that we have back and forth on the computer.
Okay. So an IM comes up on their screens in front of
Correct.
them and they see it. That is a world of differences. And I just say, as being a guest on air and you're in the process of answering a question, I can always tell when Joe's on the line because all of a sudden there's kind of another very low conversation going on in the room.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah. Then that's sometimes it's like, I got to make sure that I'm not speaking too loudly because it might go from their headset into the mic. So yeah, it's a dance kind of to make sure that I'm at least giving them the information correctly and quickly so they can continue to talk and make it as seamless as possible.
Okay, it should be obvious, and especially after hearing Joe for the last couple hours, that it really helps to have a producer who knows what they're talking about. So if they wanted to replace Joe, they'd really have to look. I'm serious, to find somebody who could do the things. And we didn't even get into anything about the Caps or whatnot, but Joe's a big Caps fan. If you want to talk hockey with him,
I am. But yeah, we don't get too many hockey calls up here in Baltimore, but it's like basically if you go north of Route 50, no one wants to talk hockey. South of that or west of that, you're good. But no, give me a call. I'm definitely able to. I'll definitely take some hockey calls.
All right. Other folks out there, thanks a lot for listening. If you're at this point in the show, we know you love it. Please try and tell that one new person why they ought to listen to Film Study. We're always looking for a little bit of word of mouth increase in the audience, even though we've been very much appreciate all the listenership we have. And if you're still online, write us a 5-minute 50-word review, 5-star 50-word review. That's what I'm looking for, and we appreciate that as well. Joe, thanks again for coming on.
No, thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.